Dear friends, well, here we are, the morning after the night before, Israel just having had its fourth elections in 2 years, and we're yet to know exactly what the future holds. But today, with you, we want to reach beyond the shores of Israel. We want to reach every Jewish community around the world, and the world at large. And we will do it with the help of two of Israel's major organizations. The Jewish Agency for Israel, headed by its chairman, Isaac Herzog, one of Israel's most illustrious diplomats, politicians, and leaders, who has excelled in everything he has done and whose family is an integral part of Israel's history and achievements. And the Foreign Ministry of Israel, which will be represented by Alon, Ushpiz, its Director General, a veteran diplomat who has served Israel around the world and who sees the relations between Israel and the Jewish communities and the world as a top priority for the ministry. With them as moderator, we will have the honor of having Ms. Tzipi Livni, former Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Justice, and Minister of Foreign Affairs, one of Israel's most experienced and excellent diplomats, in fact, probably the First Lady of Israeli politics. They will look at the relations between us, between Israelis and Jews around the world and the international community, and discuss ways of enhancing this partnership, which we regard as vital, and of building an even stronger bridge between us and you, wherever you are, in order to make sure that this partnership will assure not just the prosperity and safety of Israel, but the bond, the everlasting bond between us and the Jewish communities and the international communities around the world. As chairman of the America-Israel Friendship League, I'm proud and honored to host this webinar and hope you will enjoy it. I wish you all, wherever you are, a happy Pesach, Passover, happy Easter, happy Ramadan, and thank you for being with us.
Hello, everybody. I hope that you already heard the Dan Gillerman message to you all. Hello, Buji, Herzog.
Hi, Tzipi. Good to see you.
Hello, Alon, Ushpiz. Good to see you too.
Hi, Tzipi.
And it's nice to see you all and to watch and to read all the happy Passover coming from all over the world, from Toronto, New York, Memphis, Ra'anana, different parts in Israel, in the United States, and all over the world. It is really touching and moving. And we are here today in order to open a new dialogue between Israel and the world Jewry. And I want to start with an introductory remark saying something about what happened yesterday in Israel. As you all know, we had elections in Israel. And I just want to say at the beginning that we are not going to discuss any political issue that is connected to Israel because of different reasons. One, because we don't know what the results are. And secondly, because the Jewish Agency and the Foreign Ministry are all representing something which is not connected to internal political matters in Israel, and therefore we will not also answer questions about these issues. And speaking about this important initiative, well, I'm a moderator, but yet an opinionated moderator. And this dialogue is very important because I believe that we need to have a new dialogue between Israel and the world Jewry. Maybe the old dialogue was something about we are here as a safe shelter in case of anti-Semitism, and you will support, contribute, and do whatever the world Jewry did during all these years since the establishment of the State of Israel. But my feeling is that while the grandparents cried with joy when the State of Israel was established, and their children were horrified when Israel was under attack. Sometimes there's a feeling that maybe the third generation, the grandchildren, feel sometimes alienated to the State of Israel. For them, the State of Israel is a strong state. It's the existence of the State of Israel is not being questioned. But yet we need to open this new dialogue and to speak about substance, to speak about what does it mean to be a Jewish democratic state. By the way, I believe that this is a dialogue that needs to be opened also in Israel, but yet it is of utmost importance to speak about it between Israel and different Jewish communities all over the world. And this important initiative led by the Jewish Agency and the Foreign Ministry is opening this new dialogue about values, about the meaning of the State of Israel to the different Jewish communities and how we can enhance these relations. And therefore, I'll start with the chairperson of the Jewish Agency, Mr. Buji Herzog, my friend and former partner in politics. But please, the floor is yours.
So hi, Tzipi. It's great to see you. And also I want to welcome our colleague here, the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Alon Ushpiz. I want to thank, of course, the American-Israel Friendship League, a very illustrious and important organization. I want to thank its leaders and its Israel office, as well as our friends from the Jewish Agency. Tzipi, you are indeed not only a close friend, but a great partner. And just about 6 years ago, we were in the same situation as some of our friends in Israeli politics today. But today we're focused on something which is truly essential to the situation of the Jewish world. And as such, in my capacity as chairman of the executive of the Jewish Agency, the world's biggest Jewish organization, I'm very happy that we'll be holding this discussion together in the next hour. So first and foremost, I agree with you, Tzipi, that there are many challenges of the era, meaning the total consensus on Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people, which we felt when we grew up as young Israelis, is now in some quarters being challenged, and it is our duty to keep, first and foremost, all Jews under the tent and to operate for dialogue, unity, and better understanding. But first, let's just explain what the Jewish world is. So if we take, according to Professor Sergio Della Pergola, was a famous world-renowned demographer, we're speaking about 15 million Jews. I would say, halachically speaking, 15 million Jews, which about 6.5 million of them are in Israel and 6.5 million of them are in North America. I would say these are the two main pillars of the Jewish world. We also, the rest of the world, of course, is hundreds of communities in other places. But these are two pillars, have a challenge to make sure that the building stays intact, historically speaking. And most importantly, I would add that there are about 10 million human beings in addition who are eligible to emigrate to Israel under the famous law of return. So this is a fascinating Jewish world scattered all over the world with a nation state in Israel. And of course, as we, the Jewish Agency, operate in 66 countries, we clearly get the vibe of the challenge that you're speaking about today.
Alon?
Okay, sorry for the delay. I had to unmute myself. Minister Livni and Chairman Herzog, it's a pleasure to be here. And I would like to start by thanking AIFL and the Jewish Agency for this initiative, but also for the daily work that we're doing together. The things that the Foreign Ministry and Jewish Agency under the leadership of Chairman Herzog are doing, in my mind, are front and center for what we have to do as the Foreign Ministry of the State of Israel. I would like to say that this overall number of some like 25 million Jews all around the world is a strategic focal point or point of reference for this ministry. This is not reflected only in our daily activities, but also, I would dare to say, in the concept of what we have to do. And I would even go further and say that it's part of our of the way we define our mission. Or to put it in other words, at the end of the day, we are a bridge between the government of Israel and between the Jewish communities all over the world. This is not only something that is incorporated in our daily operation, but it is, I think, also something that defines us. It's a value-oriented mission, and I would even say that in 2020 and 2021, this is way beyond what we've seen in the past because of two things. First of all, the whole world is going through COVID-19, and Jewish communities are supporting us, State of Israel, but we also have the duty of supporting Jewish communities all over the world, morally and also in other aspects. And the second thing, and I would just touch upon it very briefly because I don't want to give too long of introduction, but 2020 is going down in the annals of Israeli diplomacy as the year in which we have signed 4 peace agreements, three, with the Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco, and also with Sudan. To put it differently, we have moved from 103 missions all over the world to 108. Our Bureau for Middle Eastern Affairs had 6 months ago had 2 embassies in the Middle East. Now we have 6. But it goes, I think, way beyond the figures. This is truly, in my mind, a strategic needle mover. I can explain why, but I think it's a mind-boggling development, not only when it comes to the bilateral relationship between Israel and these countries, but also for the region per se. And I would take it one step further and would say that it has implications for some parts of the international community. Last thing I want to say is that in all these countries, we have Jewish communities, smaller, larger, but very important and prominent. And for me and for the ministry, it was a touching moment to visit these places and to have conversations with the leadership of the Jewish communities there. With this, I would like just to say happy Passover to everybody, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Alon. Speaking about these moving visits to all these places, I would more than agree that we see a real change in the Middle East, and Abraham Accords are really a game changer. And for me personally, I visited Bahrain and Abu Dhabi before Abraham Accord, and meeting the Jews living there and coming to the synagogue was something that I would never forget. And I would like to ask you both, since we are talking about the State of Israel and the world Jewry, and altogether we are facing different challenges. And for many years, I used to say that altogether we need to meet these challenges together, because the State of Israel would stand with any Jew facing anti-Semitism, as I know that every Jew is standing with Israel when we are facing terror. But a part of these critic moments that we know how to be united, my question is, as every Israeli, we are facing a huge frustration about the question whether Israel is being understood outside of Israel. How do we bridge the gap between who we are and the image of Israel outside of Israel? And I would like to ask you both, how do you see the role of the Jewish communities in these places? Is the foreign ministry is working with them in order to bridge this gap, and what the Jewish agency is doing in order to strengthen these communities when it comes to sometimes criticism the state of Israel when they feel or they want to advocate for Israel? Do we give them the tools, as we should, I believe?
So if I can start, first of all, I want to refer to the issue of the Jewish communities in the Middle East because it's a fascinating phenomenon. Basically, for 70 odd years, the story of the Jewish communities of the Muslim countries was almost untold, not in the Israeli national psyche or in the world arena, in the Jewish world arena. And now, of course, we are focused on those communities. So first and foremost, we, the Jewish Agency, we are establishing a permanent presence in the Gulf. There are about 3,000 Jews in the Gulf, in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, mostly in Dubai. Then there is in Bahrain, an ancient and historical community. In Dubai, it's a lot of people who came from other countries. And there's a little bit in Kuwait, which we made touch with. In Sudan, there's none. I have family who came from Sudan, only the cemetery, unfortunately. In Morocco, there are about 2,000, 2,500, a historical community, some in Tunisia, and a dozen in Egypt. But the story, the history of 1,000 years must be told. And it's also part and parcel of the entire Jewish story. About 25,000 are still in Iran. As you said correctly, when you want to portray the story of Israel, one has to understand Israeli public life, the evolution of Israeli society. We took upon ourselves, as part of our mission to connect Jews to the state of Israel and Israelis to world Jewry and world Jewry to itself, to make a special effort of building the notion of peoplehood, Jewish peoplehood. And as such, we send thousands of emissaries every year to communities all around the world. And we have partnerships between Jewish communities and Israeli towns and villages. And we bring to Israel about 100,000 young people every year in a pre-COVID year. And the whole idea is to explain to world Jewry what Israel is all about, and explain to Israelis what world Jewry is all about. We've introduced in Israeli schools a whole curriculum of educating about world Jewry because Israelis are ignorant when it comes to world Jewry. And same goes, many Jews around the world are ignorant about what Israel is all about. So they're reading the New York Times or any other paper, but they just don't get it. The evolution of an Israeli society that have brought over Jews from over 100 countries, including this very year. So I think it's essential that we tell the story to the Jewish people, and from there on, they also serve as the voice of Israel, or at least explaining the story of Israel. And of course, we work very closely with the representation, the diplomatic representatives of Israel all over the world in trying to deliver this message. Finally, I would say that there are many Jews naturally who are perplexed, confused. We have emissaries on campuses all over the world who are meeting young Jews who have many questions, but that's fine, so long as we have a dialogue and we can explain that last night we had for the first time, a Reform rabbi who was elected to the Knesset, but also voices from the extreme right of Israel. That's part and parcel of a very vibrant democracy, rather than portray it as a disaster from here or disaster from there, because it's an inner debate and dialogue within the Israeli people.
Alon, you would like to add something?
Yes, please. I would say that the starting point for answering your question should be how do we define Israel? And in my mind, and I presume that's my personal opinion, on the matter. Israel is a joint venture that falls under the title of a family affair. And the parts of the family here are Israelis and Jewish communities all over. We are not only connected through history, heritage, and religion, and also set of values, I strongly believe, but also in an effort from the very first minute of the Zionist movement to create something here. Now, when you have to deal with the things that you've pinpointed to, Mr. Livni, I believe that the first people you go to are your family, especially when these communities are educated, opinionated, and have a reasonable amount of influence. And I don't think Israel can bypass the obligation, but also the necessity to explain ourselves to Jewish communities. And I also think that it would be a grave mistake to not to fulfill our mission through what Chairman Herzog spoke about a couple of minutes ago, and that's enhancing on mutual basis the knowledge between Israelis and Jews all around the world. Once again, going back to my starting point, a family affair.
Okay, I would like also to add something to this and to speak in a way about the elephant that is in the room, because we have different opinions, different political opinions, different views about where Israel should go, what are the political decisions that should be made. And there are different opinions also in different parts of the Jewish world. And I completely agree with what Chairperson Herzog said about, and both of you said, first, it's within the family. And we can have this discussion. And it's okay also to have an open dialogue, to listen to each other and to argue. That's fine. This is what we do in Israel, and it's okay to do it outside of Israel, as long as, and I would put in a way two conditions to this one, in an understanding that it is within the family, and secondly, without attacking the common denominator which is still there. And this is basically the essence or the base for the establishment of the state of Israel as a Jewish democratic state and the right of Israel to defend itself. And when I'm speaking about the elephant, which is in the room, especially when it comes to different communities in the United States, it's clear that there is a kind of a notion, an image that the relations in the last years were portrayed as connected to one party instead of being bipartisan in the United States as one party. And for some, they felt that they are disconnected to the Israeli government policy. And I felt when I was in the States and I met a Hillel student sharing with me that she's a liberal, but yet the image of Israel is something which is completely against liberal values. So she feels that it becomes quite complicated to advocate for the state of Israel. And I believe that even though we can have completely different opinions, there are certain tools that we can give these young people that are staying in the campus and give them the possibility to share their views and to feel connected to Israel, and even saying that there are different opinions in Israel. That's fine. This is the nature of Israel as a democracy. And we should keep Israel as a democracy, of course. And another question is that when I was a minister in the Israeli government, I felt that I need to represent, of course, the Israelis, but also in a way, since Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people, how my decisions in the Israeli government affect the world Jewry, or as a member of parliament. So when it comes to Israel security, this is one thing. It's clear that when we fight terror, sometimes, unfortunately, they would look for different Jewish communities to attack as retaliation, but yet when we are speaking about other issues like conversion, it is clear that this affects the world Jewry. Nation bill, I know that there were some questions coming from different Jewish communities. What does it mean? How this affects the nature of Israel? And I would like to ask you both: is there a different rules to or different role to the Jewish agency and the foreign ministry? Are you working together in order to give these tools to the communities?
So first of all,
or listening to their questions, how this works?
So we have people on the ground in communities all over the world. We have gap year kids actually who live in many communities and live in homes of families and work in the school system and the JCCs. We have emissaries who are doing outstanding work. We send about a few thousand emissaries every year, including to summer camps and to schools, JCCs, community centers, and federations and the like. We have representatives all over the world, and they all work very closely with the local consulates and embassies. I want to commend the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for an outstanding cooperation. Now, look, I identify three main challenges of the Jewish world today, which loom over and actually touch on what you just mentioned, Tzipi. First of all is what we call the rift, the famous debate as where Israel is heading to, mostly on issues of religion, following the Kotel debate, the conversion issue. But we must take into account the Jewish world is diversified. And I've passed on many resolutions in the Board of Governors of the Jewish Agency, I would say the Parliament of the Jewish people, to include about 1 million Israelis who live abroad, who need to be under the tent, about 15% of the Jewish world, which is ultra-Orthodox and Haredi of all diversifications. We must include everybody, and in the last Board of Governors, it was an incredible picture to see from Haredim to modern Orthodox to conservative liberals, and of course Reform and Reconstruction. I mean, this is an amazing picture to see everybody in the same hall, Zoom, or whatever you call it these days. And the idea is to enable people to have a dialogue and understand, yes, we understand that there are pains and criticism and debates and questions about our nation state and our Jewish identity. For example, you mentioned the nation state bill. It also calls for the responsibility of the state of Israel and its government towards the needs of Jews all over the world. And together we have for example, the Security Assistance Fund of the Jewish Agency, which already assisted hundreds of institutions or Jewish institutions around the world with their safety, let alone in content and other projects that we have on the ground. And for us, the connection with the Israeli local representative is vital. And this is regarding Aliyah, which is a huge issue in and of itself. You are a minister of Aliyah, and you know it, we'll discuss it later, which is a huge issue these days. The second challenge I want to point out is the issue of anti-Semitism, heavily connected to the activity of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, heavily connected to the issues challenging Jewish communities around the world. During COVID, it's increased dramatically, especially on the web. And lastly, there is another issue, a positive issue, where you have hundreds of thousands of people around the world who knock on our doors and say, we are Jewish, we want to be part and parcel of your nation. We see it a lot in Latin America, we see it a lot in other places. These are fascinating questions for the future. So all these challenges, we have the local Israeli representatives dealing with it as well.
Hello, Dan Gillerman just joined us also. We cannot hear you. Hello, Dan. Then we cannot hear you. So while you are dealing with your mic, Alon.
Yeah, I think I just unmuted, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
And welcome also on board. We are speaking about the relations, the ties, and the dialogue, the new dialogue that we should have between Israel and the world Jewry. Chairperson of the Jewish Agency just shared what the Jewish Agency is doing with the different Jewish communities. And in fact, that there are a kind of now having Jews coming and who truly wants to make Aliyah, maybe especially now in the days of COVID. And so if you would like to add something or to join us and to say something now, and I can move forward also with different questions.
No, I just want to apologize for being late. I had a board meeting which I couldn't leave, but I was really looking forward to joining you, Tzipi, and this very auspicious company. I'm honored to be with Buji Herzog, who is both a good friend and to me a role model and someone that Israelis look up to, and really had a magnificent career, and I hope very much will have an even more meaningful and distinguished career very, very soon. But thank you for all you're doing for the Jewish people and for Israel. And Alon, who I've known for many years and is, I think, truly one of Israel's most distinguished and veteran diplomats, and is now leading the foreign ministry, and hopefully will continue to do it under good leadership in the future. And you, Tzipi, of course, who to me are the first lady of Israeli politics. I'm really, really happy to be with you. I will not take up any of your time. I'll just say that to me, truly, the greatest treasure of Israel and the greatest asset of Israel is the support of the Jewish community around the world. In fact, both the support of the United States and the support of the Jewish community have always been total and bipartisan. I fear that in recent years, and I may sound a bit political there, and I apologize.
And I raised this issue, as you can imagine. Also.
Well, to me, one of the greatest dangers is this support becoming partisan. We should aim to keep it bipartisan, to bring it back to what it was, where regardless whether it's the president, the Senate, the Congress, the Jewish community in the United States and around the world, the support for Israel should be one of partnership in good times and bad times, of pride of being a Jew and being a friend of Israel. And I hope that with the help both of the Jewish Agency and of the Foreign Ministry, we will be able to restore this partnership. And I believe it's probably one of the most important tasks that we face today.
So moving forward and asking maybe Alon about the foreign ministry, so how do you face this situation when it changed from bipartisan to something that the Jewish community felt that it was one party, and what the foreign ministry is doing now in order to change it again to bipartisan, which is crucial to the future of the State of Israel and the relations between Israel and the United States?
Yeah, let me start by stating in the clearest terms possible that I would strongly affiliate myself with the way that you, Tzipi, and Ambassador Gillerman referred to the issue of bipartisanship. I think that there are things that are that sacred in Israeli foreign policy, but I think it goes way beyond foreign policy. That one should do whatever he can in order to protect them, to enshrine them. And I think that bipartisanship, certainly in the context of Israel-US relationship, is top of the draft of these things. Now, as I said, the first thing to do is to recognize But then the second thing, I think, which is very important, is to speak about it and to state it in the most obvious terms possible. And we have to do that not only in the US, and certainly not only in the Beltway, but also in other places in the world. And I think it's the duty and the mission of Israeli diplomats, of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, to speak about the sacred nature of bipartisanship between Israel and the US, also in places like Berlin and New Delhi. And I think it will also strengthen the very solid nature of the strategic relationship we have with the States. But I would also say that this is not only about recognizing and stating. This should also be reflected in actions. And here I want to refer to two things, or maybe even three things. First of all, I think that in the conversation between us and the Jewish communities in the world, and certainly in the US, Israelis and the Israeli government, and certainly the Israeli Foreign Ministry, have to be very much attuned to the things that bother these communities. That's what stands at the center of the dialogue that you, Minister Livni, has referred to 5 minutes ago. If we really want to have this family affair flourish, we have to understand that some of the things that we do or decide on have implications on these Jewish communities. And these Jewish communities also have to understand that some of the responsibilities of the decisions that we take have implications that go directly to the heart of the existence of the State of Israel. The second thing is that we have to act in a way that reflects what you call bipartisanship. I had the honor of serving as the Israeli liaison to the American Congress. Actually, I think it's the first time we met, Minister Livni, in one of your tours to DC. And everything we do on the Hill, and I think this should stay based on this, is bipartisanship. Every delegation, just as an example, every delegation that comes to Israel is composed of people from both sides of the aisle. Last but not least, and I think this is something very important for us to recognize, and Chairman Herzog and Minister Livni and also Ambassador Gillerman referred to this. We cannot agree on everything, and I think it's very legitimate to have differences of opinion on different issues, not only between Israel and the Jewish communities, even if they are diversified and heterogeneous. There are also differences of opinion between the government of Israel, the government that I represent, and other governments. And we have to iron these differences, and we have to speak about them, we have to debate them, and we have to energetically try to minimize the gaps on these different issues. This should be done based on the merits of the issue. I don't think it should turn into something which is very much different, and we have to do it while preserving the bipartisanship nature of the relationship.
Thank you, Alon. I worked as a minister with completely two different administrations, with the Bush administration, with the Republican, with the Democrat, with the Obama administration, and we can argue on different issues, but it was very discreet, and it was in closed rooms, and it didn't affect the merit or the importance of the relations. The good news, I believe, is that the average Israeli understands that the relations between Israel and the United States of America are of importance to the State of Israel, and therefore any new government that would be formed in Israel after these elections would try and work with the new American administration as part of its responsibility. This is what I believe in. And secondly, I think that there is something which is very important to understand, because when I'm speaking about the common denominator, it's clear that when we speak about Israel as a Jewish democratic state, we need to have both sides of the equation, living in harmony, not in contradiction. And when we speak about Israel as a Jewish state, it doesn't mean that Israel is Jewish from a religious perspective, but from a national perspective. And when it comes from, and when it means that we are one nation or one people, it means that the monopoly of the Jewishness of the states is not by religious establishment, religion establishment, and therefore we should and we can embrace different streams in Judaism as part of being a Jewish state without giving this monopoly to different religious parties. But now we were asked about the law of return, and I would like to ask you, Mr. Herzog, you were speaking about Aliyah, and I was also former Minister of Immigrant Absorption. Now, in times of anti-Semitism, and it is clear that part of the role and responsibility of the Jewish Agency is to take care of Aliyah. And my question is, how do you manage to have this delicate situation in which you call citizens of one nation, one state, one country to live and come to the state of Israel, and doing it without raising questions or questions about the relations between the Jewish community in this place and the country itself?
So look, first of all, the notion of Aliyah and the whole phenomena is just amazing. It's mind-boggling, in my mind, metaphysical. Just to explain, this year during COVID, 2020, we had 21,000 Jews who made Aliyah, who came from dozens of countries, around 50 countries, and decided to leave their homes in COVID, in the lockdown, to break through the COVID, to find always all sorts of ways to get to Israel when you don't have travel, to move to a quarantine hotel of the Jewish Agency and stay there for 2 weeks with their families in a new language, somebody bringing them food 3 times a day, and start a new life in the ancient new homeland. It's an amazing phenomenon, clearly. Now we see an enormous interest of Jews all over the world in Aliyah now, post-COVID. We see it as something that has many reasons to it. We see a tripling of the amount of opening files in North America, for example. We have Jews from all over the world who are pleading to us to come. It also has to do with the outstanding, the way Israel is portrayed as functioning very well during COVID, especially with the vaccinations, but also many other reasons, like what's the future of our community, where will my children grow Jewish. I will add and say that during COVID, we've assisted so many communities around the world who literally collapsed. And that financial model, keeping a private education, is very difficult for communities. And therefore, we have a lot of young Jews from all over the world. Now, this delicate issue that you mentioned is known to us. We're not telling Jews that the only alternative is making Aliyah. We are encouraging Aliyah, but we're also empowering Jewish communities to live and flourish and wherever they are around the globe with no harassment and no hate, enabling them to have good Jewish life. And the same goes for the way we deal with Aliyah. We explain what the conditions are of making Aliyah. We prepare people for Aliyah. We don't tell them in a way that sounds in any way, aggressive. And this is the new language of dealing with Aliyah. Of course, there are nations in duress and there are Jews at risk. That's a totally different story. We are dealing with that 24/7. So yes, we expect a huge wave of Aliyah. In the next 3 to 5 years, we expect 250,000 Jews. And this is an incredible number. And I would say that the ancient blessing of in gathering the exiles, which we say in our prayers, and we say also, we mention even the Haggadah, goes on.
Thank you. I remember my visit with Ariel Sharon, the former Israeli Prime Minister, to Moscow. And we had a meeting with President Putin. And he didn't like the idea that we are encouraging Jews to leave Moscow and come to Israel. And he asked Arik Sharon about it in a kind of a cynic question and way. Therefore, I asked I asked about this sensitivity between calling Jews to come and sometimes the governments who want them to stay. Now, you mentioned last year of COVID and the notion that Israel is turning or is being portrayed and accepted as startup nation. I must say that I personally remember times in which I visited different parts of the world and was always asked about the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But in the last few years, I'm being asked mostly about Israeli startups. And so would you like to share, is it really a change that you feel amongst those that are coming to the Jewish Agency asking to come to Israel? Is this part of this new trend amongst Jewish communities?
Yeah, so it's a very good question, because it also relates to our previous comments. When I go into a Jewish community and I'm asked a lot about all the issues that face Jewry, and including, by the way, political debates, before the US elections, I keep on telling everybody that the love of Israel, what we call Ahavat of Israel, must be way above any personal or political debate. It's something inherent. You can argue with Israel, but you have to understand how Israel is important to world Jewry and its basic right to exist. You can challenge, you can criticize. Don't undermine the right of the nation state of your people to exist. Now, the conflict is less discussed. It's always discussed, but it's less discussed as a major issue. There are other issues, and you are correctly saying that Israel as a center of high tech is extremely attractive to young people. I know that you have been, involved a lot with high tech ideas and initiatives, and you know how it attracts young people. Tzipi, you see, it gives them a sense of purpose. It's like other thematic issues that we at the Jewish Agency are trying to put forward. Climate change can be a great attraction to young Jews who want to come here to Israel and impact this topic, because with water desalination or water tech or solar energy and so forth and so on, I can find many issues that attract young Jews to come to Israel, and high tech is clearly one of them. We have a company called ITC, Israel Tech Challenge, where we bring young Jews to work in Israel, learn how to become software developers, and then they are immediately employed by the major companies. We have Masa, our flagship program. We bring about 15,000 young Jews from all over the world for a internship year in all types of employment, and you see how high tech interests them. So it's part and parcel of getting you on board of your Jewish identity.
And another question that we are getting, and I think that you already answered that, about the opposite road, about Israelis, or about the goal or the challenge that we are having to have more Israelis understanding the Jewish communities. Is there, or are there programs that are doing the opposite, or opening Israelis to know, to understand different parts of the Jewish world, not only the United States?
There are many ideas about a reverse birthright. Yes, so, it goes both ways. The two pillars, which I always call Jerusalem and Babylon, 6.5 million Jews in Israel and 6.5 in North America, and then a few million in all other communities. And here I must point out that the Jewish Agency's main principal partners are the Jewish Federations of North America, which is the umbrella organization of the entire Jewish collective in North America, Keren Hayesod, which operates outside North America in all communities, and of course the World Zionist Organization. They're all supporting us in having a two-way bridge, namely bringing to Israel about 100,000 Jews in various immersive experiences and sending to the communities thousands of young Israelis. We have about a club of about 15,000 emissaries who came back to Israel, and they are change agents in Israeli society regarding world Jewry.
Thank you. We need to wrap up in a few minutes, and I was asked to ask Alon to start with wrapping up this discussion because, as I understand, you need to leave us early.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I want to wrap up by saying, by referring to something that you've said about the interest of Jewish communities in the softer power side of Israel and Israeli society. And I think, in a way, it describes very well the evolution that Israeli foreign policy and I think Israel has gone in the last couple of years. I think, Mr. Livni, you were very much accurate in the way you put your finger on the pie of conversation, in the part of the political issues, including the Israeli-Palestinian issue a couple of years ago. But I think this has changed. And I think it has changed not only in the conversation between us and the Jewish communities. I think it has changed in the conversation between us and our partners all over the world. And this is one of the most, I would say, enriching and fulfilling development in the way we interact with the world. I think it is tremendously important for Israelis to understand that when we come to the table of the international community, when we approach the table of our partners, nation states, countries in the world, we come with, I will borrow a term from another field, we come with a full wagon. And the contents of this full wagon is our set of values. We are like-minded with many of our partners, but also with a very unique set of capabilities, which is based on experience. We know to do things that are unique in nature, and I think should make every Israeli and also every member of any Jewish community all over the world very proud. Chairman Herzog spoke about climate change. This is a major thing that we know how to do, and we have to present to our partners: desalination, water, food security, clean energy, the whole concept of how do you design an ecosystem for R&D and innovation. And from that point of view, the fact that we are more and more invested, I would even say that we are going back to the, in a way, to the 70s when it comes to Israeli aid to the developing world. In this sense, I think that the things that we can do together with the Jewish communities are not less than mind-boggling. And in a way, I think it will shape Israeli nature and the face of Israeli foreign policy in the next decade. Together with some of our partners, we are involved in a very interesting dialogue with the Emirates about how do we do together things in third countries. So I'm very hopeful in this regard, and I think people here should do this more and more.
Okay. Thank you, Alon. I must say personally that I'm glad that there is no linkage anymore between the way the world looks at and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but yet I believe that it is our responsibility to solve it. Buji, would you like to wrap up shortly?
Yeah, so wait a minute. Okay. So yes, I think that it's all intertwined. The story of the Jewish people is deeply intertwined with the story of Israel and Israeli diplomacy. It always has been. clearly the equation has shifted in terms of, I would say the paradigm of Israel, how it looks on world Jewry and vice versa. But in a small global village, it's all literally connected. We have like a 24-hour emergency room where we receive data on every incident or every event or any issue pertaining to a community around the world. And it's as if the pulsating heart of the Jewish people is one at a given moment. So if God forbid there was an event in Pittsburgh a few years ago, the entire Jewish world's heart has stopped beating. And therefore, I believe that way above all arguments, there is a certain feeling of close affinity and identity. We can argue and debate. We have so many questions as were put on the chat, etc. But at the end of it all, above all, and on the eve of Pesach, there's nothing more to add than to say that, Pesach explains to us for thousands of years already why we are one nation and why we have to remember the lesson at each generation. So let's learn the lesson and work together. And thank you all for participating and leading this wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Let's thank together our host, Dan Gillerman. Please, could you say a few words to wrap up?
Well, thank you.
Arranging
Once again, let me first of all apologize for being late. It's very rude. A host should usually wait for his guests rather than the other way around. But originally, I was not scheduled to actually take an active part, but I'm glad I did. And from what I heard, and I'm sure I missed a lot of very wise words before I joined, both from Buji and from Alon and from you, Tzipi, I want to thank you for this very important discussion. I want to thank you for your insight, for your wisdom, for your sharing, all of you, sharing your experiences with us. I think we're really dealing with one of the most important, maybe even existential issues of the Jewish world and of Israel. As Buji rightly said, Israel and the Jewish communities are intertwined. We are moving from different phases of partnership, but I still think the key indeed is partnership. I think that every Jew around the world should be proud of being a partner with this incredible odyssey and this wonderful achievement, which is the State of Israel. And again, as Buji rightly said, you can disagree with us, you can argue with us, but at the end of the day, you should continue to support us and hopefully also love us as we do love all of you around the world. So I would like to really extend my very, very sincere thanks to Chairman Herzog, to Buji, to Director General Alon Ushpiz, who is really carrying the torch of the foreign ministry. And God knows who he will be passing the title of minister to in the next few weeks, but good luck. And to you, Tzipi, for your excellent moderation.
Thank you.
And as chairman of the America-Israel Friendship League, I just want to tell you that we will continue these webinars. We will continue to try and bring the beauty, the excellence, the compassion of Israel to every corner of the world by doing it. We're doing it twice a week on a Wednesday and on a Sunday. This, because of Pesach, we will not have a webinar this weekend, but we will meet again next Wednesday in the multi-faith session together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Boston. And in the meantime, I wish you all our listeners, all our participants, and especially the ones who participated in this webinar, good health, stay well, be safe, and happy Pesach, happy Passover, happy Easter, and happy Ramadan, wherever you are.
Amen. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Chag Sameach.
Excellent.
Hag
Thank you.
Sameach.
Hag Sameach.
Bye-bye.